selecting the right one to do it on. Because like I started off and would do a couple of open houses. Like when I very first started, they're like, hey, you want to do an open house on my listing? And it was with the team. I would go and do an open house and like nobody would show up. Oh, is it recording now?
Yep.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Yep, we're on.
And then,
Just put that in pocket.
yeah. So it was actually kind of an accident how I found it out, because I made a deal to get a higher split where I would just take over my own production, and my main plan was to do all the online stuff. And in the meantime, I was panicking because I know that takes a little while, so I was like, I'll just go try doing open houses, and it really clicked. So I used to just call the currently scheduled open houses to see if I could do it for them. And it was hit or miss. And then one day, one of the agents said, oh, well, obviously I'm doing the open house that I have scheduled, but call me any other time and set one up. And then that's when like the light bulb went off. So I started looking at, might be jumping ahead, but just, listings that looked good. And I would call them to do an open house. And the very first one that I did, it picked up the Hensleys. The very first time I did an open house, it was back in, started doing it consistently. It was in January of 2023. Met them 2 days later. They got pre-approved. We started looking at houses, and then they closed, and I just started chasing after that, just by doing open houses every weekend. So, but yeah, I guess we'll go ahead and start. So just some basic materials. So I put a ton of signs out. These ones are my favorite, and I can send you guys the Amazon link. So these are only, I think it's about $67 for 10 of them, or 12. So you'll get two that are like this, and then 10 like this. They're just the generic ones. You guys, I'm sure, see a ton of open house signs that are, half of it is somebody's face, and like very small fine print. So like I like these because they're just two colors that stick out, and you can actually see it from the road when you're driving by. I just put a lot of them out, and I'll have a map, so I'll kind of show you. But these are my favorite. I also tried branded signs. So this is an older one. These, I think, they're about $400 for about 20 or 30 of them. But people like to steal them for some reason. Haven't ever had that issue with the generic ones, but when I started doing the branded ones, they started disappearing a lot. I don't know why, but
Other agents.
yeah.
Totally.
The one plus with this is I would get texts, every other weekend from clients or people that I knew, and they would take a picture of the sign and be like, I see your open house sign. So that's kind of neat. So like this is better for just SOI. But I like these overall just because it's cheaper, and people steal them less. And then I wouldn't. So like a lot of people also, they'll put every single weekend that they do an open house, they'll do like a printout like this with the address and the day and time and put them on every single sign. I wouldn't do it. It's just not worth it. So I just have the directional signs, and then the day and time I just stick it in the front yard. So that way they just drive all the way up to it. Sometimes the signs are a mile out. Sometimes they're half a mile out. But yeah, so it's a pain to do that every single weekend. So I've been doing them every weekend, so I've gotten lazy and figured out just kind of like the most efficient way to do it. Oh yeah, and then I'll show you, like, here's a map, an example of it. So like this is one that I did, and so you have powers. So I put out usually 3 or 4, and it'll be pointing this way, 3 or 4 pointing that way, and then one at the corners, just so whatever happens, somebody drives through the intersection and they see signs somewhere. So I'll typically look for something, next to a main road and shopping center. And then on the corners, I like to put signs, especially, and pay attention to like other listings, because like sometimes there'll be a listing up here and they'll be having an open house, and if I don't put a sign right here that's the same sign as these, then they'll just put their signs out and steal all the traffic.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so I like to do just signs generally at every corner. It just depends. and then leading up to it, and then at intersections I'll typically do 4, just so it catches people's eye, and then like 1 or 2 leading up to it in the neighborhood.
Can I ask a stupid question? It may
Yeah.
not be a stupid question, but I've never done one.
Yeah.
When you put out signs, do you start at the house and go out, or do you start as far out as you're going to go and go to the house?
It depends. Like sometimes I start at the house, sometimes I start down on the street. I don't really have a.
No designated thing.
I look at so I always look at a map. I'm jumping ahead a little bit, but I always look at a map just to make sure that so some of those corners are they're not going to have any grass or anything. I don't have any A-frames, so I always look for an area where I can stick the signs into.
Right.
I'd also bring
Brings me to this.
yeah.
So, like, I have some agents that use these A-frames or whatnot, and we put them like in the middle, like there's an island right here. We'll put them in the islands, and they're stop signs, and there's like this thing right in the middle of the street. Can't miss it.
And then with that, I always bring a hammer with me because I don't like stepping on the middle part so much, especially in the winter when it's cold, or if it's a curb with rocks in it. I'll just bring a hammer and then I'll put it in. It's usually easier if you put it right where the rocks meet the curb. There's almost always a little gap right there, and I'll just like hammer it in. 'Cause I break these all the time, especially in the
I
winter.
know.
But yeah, just making sure that you can actually put the signs on there. So I'll do the street view, and then just kind of plan it out that way in my head. And then sometimes I'll start at the house. It's usually better to start at the house, so that way you have the signs going up and you're working your way out. Versus starting where the traffic is, and then people start driving, and then they don't know where the open house is. So yeah, but. Yeah, like the one. Remember, I invited you to the one at Pascal.
Yeah.
Yeah. So dropping offers with the Breckies that I met over at Pascal.
Oh, really?
But yeah, and it
You
was
ever have to
similar to
ask
this.
People for permission to put it in like in their yards or something? Because I've asked
Oh,
in the past ways to do that.
The biggest issue I have is with some apartment complexes. They don't know what the planting strip is. It's public property. So especially over in Cheyenne Meadows, so those apartment complexes out there, if you put one on the public property, their maintenance guys are going to come out and say, this is mine, it belongs to me, and steal the sign. So, and then also, it depends, but mainly up in the Broadmoor is where I also have an issue with it, is, I got a call one time, and the guy was like, why is your sign in my yard? You better come take it out. So I drove up to his house and was like, hey, it's public property, all this stuff, talked with him, and we worked it out. But it's just more of like a feeling thing, because, especially in the nicer areas, people tend to be a little bit more territorial. So sometimes I won't put as many signs out if there's clearly like an electrical box or a fire hydrant, like not right in front of a fire hydrant, but somewhere near there. Those people tend to have a little bit more of an understanding that, oh, that's not my yard, there's public utilities there. But yeah, sometimes people do get territorial. So, and that's the other drawback of having the phone number on my sign, is because he called me about that. Otherwise, he probably just would have left it. But and then so I only bring one MLS sheet, mainly because I would do all sorts of printouts, and I was spending like $200 a month on ink, and it got kind of annoying. But then I also found out like there's no point in me bringing a whole bunch of MLS sheets for people, because they're either unrepresented, and I can email it to them later after I get their email, or they already have a realtor and that's their realtor's job, and I'm not going to keep spending money to help them out. If the MLS sheet is the only reason that they're going to leave their email and phone number, it's probably fake. But I just don't hand it out. I usually keep it on the table. And I keep a spare one, because sometimes, especially if it gets busy, they'll just take it and run away. But I'll usually keep it with me in my hand or in my pocket somewhere, so if they want to look, they can look. But yeah, there's no point in going overboard, especially if you're going to do it every weekend. So just trying to keep the costs and everything down. Sign-in sheets, so these are the ones that I started off with. Pros and cons to these ones. So these ones are mainly for me. And what I would do when I started off is I would write down like their search criteria and everything, and then they would fill it out. And then I would go back and I would, spend an hour or two looking at houses for them, send them a bunch of stuff. And I stopped doing that just because it was time consuming. It's probably better to do that, but it got annoying after a while because then I would spend, like an hour or two looking for the perfect house for them. And the reality is most of them are 3 to 6 months out, and also you're not going to hear back from a lot of people, so it got kind of annoying, like spending all that time looking at houses for them, and you never hear from them again. And also, like I like the, you can have like digital signups. I just like having the paperwork, so then I can go through every few months and make notes on them, like their timelines, things like that, as far as follow-up goes. My dog ate this morning. I'm so sorry. So this is what I'm using now. And they ate, some of the leads. Happens sometimes. So this is the sheet that I'm using now. So it's just a little bit more streamlined. But you could do either or, and play around with it. But that's it for the sign-in sheets. And then I have some market updates. Sometimes I point to these, sometimes I don't. If there isn't like a conversation point that I can latch onto easily, then I'll kind of steer them over to this because it's just data and numbers. And I don't know, you guys can look at this if you want to. I'll send out some more examples. So this is probably like the main thing that works as far as follow-up is I'll send these out. So they'll have, like this one. This one was a while ago, but it was talking about the foreclosure rates. Remember, was it last year on the news? Everyone was talking about how foreclosure rates are up 137%. And it was all over the news. So I put out a market update saying, yeah, the national foreclosure rate is 137%. In El Paso County, it's actually 420%. But when you look at the actual numbers, it's actually the lowest number of foreclosure rates since 1997. And they're doing that because they compared it to 2020, 2021, and 2022, when there were like 200 or 300 foreclosures. And then it shot up to like 700 in 2024, and everyone was freaking out. But the average is like 2,000. So it's relatively normal. And like this year was only like 556, I think, as far as foreclosures go. But just pointing things out like that. And then I like to use active listings, sale price to original list price, average sale price, and then average days to sell. And I'll and what I do is I don't filter it by Colorado Springs or El Paso County. It's just everything in the MLS. Because the bulk of it is, the bulk of it is everything generally within 20 miles or so, which still affects the market. Because, you'll have people that are looking in Colorado Springs, Broadmoor, Ute Valley, Peyton, Monument, so it just gives a better picture than just Colorado Springs, than El Paso County. So I just think it just gives a better picture of what's going on in the market. And then this is what I'll do for like a 10-year one. I had this left over from a different event, but I'll use a lot more different metrics, and I'll do it over a 10-year period. So I meet somebody, I'll send them a 10-year market update, and then a market update showing the difference between a year. But I do it because you can actually see like things are still going up. They're probably going to keep going up. Here's what's going on, in the market with foreclosures, things like that, and all the jobs moving, all the jobs coming out here. The last one I talked about all the federal employees that may or may not get fired. I know in DC, everybody's freaking out saying that it's going to be like 2008 because all the federal employees are getting fired. It's not true. Like over here in this area, I would say maybe 1,000 to 3,000 people, which isn't going to have a huge impact, if anything. And that's assuming that they're a homeowner and that they don't stay here and all that other stuff. So it's not really something that I'm worried about, especially with all the jobs out here. Finding the right listing. So really looking at something, again, just next to a main road, something that has a little bit of curb appeal. Typically, I like to keep it around like the 500, 600,000 price point. If you do it on, the $1 million houses or anything in Broadmoor, like I had open houses where I think 52 people showed up in between Saturday and Sunday. So in 6 hours, had 52 people, didn't pick up a single person. Most of them are just looky-loos. And most of the time, listings over $1 million, agents typically aren't going to let you do an open house. Just depends on the agent. But 5 or 600 seems to be the sweet spot for picking people up. And then the lower end price point you go, a lot more looky-loos that aren't pre-approved. I had one show up, it was like a $350,000 listing and got them pre-approved for $97.
Over 30 years.
Can't make that up.
But they called me after you.
So that seems to be the sweet spot. And then ideally it's vacant. It just ups the chances of getting the open house. Also, I like them vacant because if I go out and put signs out on a Friday, and then they get an offer and go under contract Friday night or Saturday morning, if somebody's living there, they're not going to want to do an open house. And that's happened a few times, especially early on. And it was really annoying after putting up signs for an hour or two and then having to go back and take them down. So vacant's better. And then regardless, if they do get another offer, I'll have that conversation of, hey, it's vacant. Do you want me to just do the open house anyway so you can maybe get backup offers? And it's always good when a buyer gets a house under contract and they see that you're still marketing it, because then they might behave a little bit more. It freaks them out because I've done that before where they'll get it under contract and I'm still doing an open house and they show up and they're like, what's going on? Like really, really like nervous. I think it's funny, but it's good for the seller. Let's see. We kind of went over sign placement and everything and just making sure it fits on the corners and then just putting out a lot of signs. I wouldn't overdo it. I know one guy puts out like 40 signs at an intersection. It's just too much, like 3 or 4 will do it. 1 or 2 usually isn't enough because, when you're driving, there's so many different signs out there. It's just got to be something that catches your eye. So I found that 3 or 4 usually works just at the turns and intersections, and then smaller intersections, 4 of them, 1 on each corner. When you do call the listing agent, I found what doesn't work if you call and say, oh, hey, can I do an open house? They're probably just going to say no. But if you just call them and say, oh, hey, I was looking at, an address of their listing, I guess I should start over. Oh, hey, Rob, I was looking at your listing on 123 Main Street. I was calling to see if I could do an open house this weekend on Saturday and Sunday from 12 to 3 on both days. And if so, I'll put out signs on Friday to get traffic going by. And that usually works a lot better because, it sounds like you have a plan versus, hey, can I do an open house? So if you're just more direct with, hey, I want to do an open house, here's the day and times, and I'm going to put out signs the day before to get traffic going by, they'll usually say yes. Sometimes they say no. Sometimes they say things like, no, open houses are only for only for you to pick up leads. And I'll tell them, hey, like I get it, but open houses and all the digital marketing that you do outside of the MLS typically have the same success rate, so about 4% or so. Like I've got about a 10% offer rate on open houses that I do, and I do them a little bit differently. So somebody walks in and they already have an agent. I take that down, the buyer's name and the agent's info, and I pass it on to you so it counts as a showing. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. Not so much anymore, but when the lawsuit was going on, especially with the Remax guys, they would say, no, you can't do an open house because you have to sign an exclusive right to buy the second they walk in the door. And I was like, no, and don't do that because that's illegal. And got that, but I haven't heard that recently. But it was going on last fall quite a bit.
When people call me and say, "Can I do an open house on one of your listings?"
Yeah.
They're like, "I'm from Keller Williams," and I'm like, "Oh man, no." I have to think about it, right?
Yeah.
So when they call me and they say something like, "Hey, I'd like to do an open house on your property. It's positioned right. I will make you look good. I will give you all the feedback." They're basically, I'm like, okay, I might look pretty good on this one. Right?
Yeah.
I'll call my clients and tell them that I have somebody doing an open house. Those people call me. The person that does the open house calls me and says, "Here's the 8 people that came in. Here's what they said, the feedback." And so then I give that to my people, and I look good. Maybe I can get them down in price if it was overpriced. All kinds of stuff.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of how you have to approach people, because most of the time I'm like, oh, I don't want a bunch of Keller Williams signs out there in front of my house.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. And there's like tons of different scripts that you can use. Tons of different ways to do things. And then
You're doing it. You're actually getting it.
That's typically what works. If and then after that, I'll let them know, hey, I'll send you a summary of both days with everyone who's represented, and then like their feedback and things like that. But that's after they've already agreed to it, because typically I'll just zip through and I'll usually start looking at them on either Wednesdays or Thursdays. So that gives me a whole day to plan signs and go get signs out on Friday. Be careful with highways. So if you put them out too early on Fridays, sometimes the state people drive by and they're like, you have to take those down. It's against the law. And it's not a law. It's just some stupid ordinance about making things look nice. So if like I'm on Highway 115, for example, I'll go out and do them, past 5 p.m. on a Friday when nobody's working and nobody cares. So, but yeah, I've had that happen a couple times before. Technically they're called, ghost signs. You're allowed to put them up between noon on Friday and noon on Monday, anywhere on public property. And I'm not a lawyer, but that's what the city ordinances and everything reads, except for technically highways. But I do it anyway. So just
You lose $6, they take your sign, right?
yeah.
As long as you don't have your name on it, your number, you're good to go.
Yeah. The only and if you're ever doing one in Paintbrush Hills, check with Metro Districts has some funny rules, but in Paintbrush Hills, for example, I spent about 2 hours putting up, it was about 40 signs everywhere. And as I get done with the last one, I look behind me and there's a trailer with the Metro District guys, and they just been following me, picking up all my signs. They're like, you can't do that. And I was like, yes, I can. And so I called the Metro District manager, and he's like, no, he just made this rule up on his own. He's like, it has to have the address of the house on there, because otherwise you're just going to leave the signs and they're going to get blown away everywhere. And got in a fight with them, but it was on one of my listings, so I was like, I'm not going to fight with them too much. So I went back and put the address on the house, and then put the signs back up. But just watch out for Paintbrush Hills. And I think he's the same guy: Paintbrush Hills, Meridian Ranch, and Woodman. Yeah, he's kind of involved in all of those. So weird area. And then HOAs are kind of hit or miss. I've never really had an issue with an HOA, just that one Metro District. So. Let's see.
Did they give you your signs back?
Yes. Oh, never mind. I shouldn't say that on camera. I'll tell you after. So as far as so identify the listing, put up all the signs on a Friday, and then I'll usually just do a 5-minute showing time for access, just so I don't annoy or block anything, because sometimes people have don't allow overlapping showings. So if you try to block off like a big chunk of time, it'll interfere with the listing agent's listings. So I just do like a 5-minute showing time request for like, if it's at 12, then I'll do it for 11:45 for 5 minutes, and then put in the comments open house access for Saturday and Sunday. And then so I'll show up a little bit early, and what I'll typically do is sit in my car, at least until the first few people show up, and then I'll go inside. But I've met a couple of people just by sitting in my car. One time I did it, and it was snowing, and so this car pulls up, and it's got an Army PC in there, or Army hat. And I used to be in the Army, and I saw them just, pull up and look on their phone. So I got out and went and said, hey, and I was like, oh, what unit are you in? Started talking, and they never went into the house, but we ended up closing like 2 years later. They had a very
That's
difficult
aggressive.
file.
So you're sitting in your car
Yeah.
until the first people
Yeah.
show up.
Or
they're not going to walk in.
Right. Or, somebody shows up, I go inside, and then when they leave, I'll go back and sit in my car again. And
that sign, the A-frame that says "Please come in."
yeah,
Help.
I think that would. Yeah, I think
wouldn't
that would
wanna
be a
sit
good
in the
idea.
car then?
Yeah. Well, I'd still probably sit in my car.
Why again are you sitting in your car?
Huh?
Why?
Oh, so for two reasons. One, to pick up people who may not actually come in because they might
So they
Google
kinda
it.
hesitate when you jump
Right.
out and grab them?
Right.
Right.
Exactly.
So-
Yeah, crazy.
So.
That is like.
Because sometimes like they'll see it and they'll Google it, and most of them don't know what their price point is. Maybe they want 5 bedrooms and it's a 4, and that was the case on this one. Is it was a 4-bedroom and they wanted a 5-bedroom, so they weren't even going to bother going in. And that's happened I think 3 times. And then I also sit out just to kind of count how many cars are going by. Just to see how effective is that area. Is it a good area? Like, are people actually seeing the signs and driving by? And then also it's good feedback for the listing agent, because like if there are cars just driving by and looking at the house and they just keep going, something's probably
You could
wrong with
say
the
10
exterior.
People drove by and
Yeah, and didn't even
Wow.
want to come in.
No big deal.
Yeah.
I think with that "Please come in" sign, because I know what it's like. I'm a realtor, and I'll be in California, and it'll say "open house," and I go drive over there, and I go, "Oh, look at that." I want to go in, crap, there's a realtor in there, they're gonna be bugging me, about buying, because they always do, and I go, okay, I go in there, and sure enough, they want to tell me about how great the house is and stuff. And I'm a realtor, and I feel like I don't know if I'm gonna go in or not, right?
Yeah.
But if there was an A-frame said "Please come in," I'm like, I'd think I'm just gonna go in. I don't know. There's that mental hurdle, I guess, to
Yeah.
get in, and so
Yeah.
that's what you're combating when you didn't have a sign. You
Right.
just have signs "Open house."
Yeah, right. Yeah, with the days and
Right,
times on. I've never tried
exactly.
the please
It's not
come in, which is a
inviting
really good
them in.
idea.
You're sitting out in your car and
Yeah.
you'll jump on them when they're stopped looking at you.
Yeah, yeah.
That's pretty stinking awesome.
With the guy
And-
that you met outside, right? I mean,
Yeah.
you just walked up to him, you started talking, you built rapport or whatever.
Yeah.
Did you give him a business card? Did you ask for his phone number?
So
Like, how did you guys stay in touch? You know
So
what I mean?
I never give out business cards. I guess I'll just jump ahead on that topic. What I'll do is that actually bleeds into this. So like, don't do what everybody else does. So
Yeah.
it's probably like the biggest takeaway is, like you walk into an open house and the realtor wants you to sign. Like, don't make them sign in at first. Don't make them sign in. I'll usually, when they walk up, I'll ask them, what has you looking? And it's just kind of a screening question, because a lot of times they look at me funny and they're like, well, I'm looking to buy. And I'll let them know, I just asked that because there are a lot of, neighbors, and there are some serial lookers. I see them all the time. People have it as a hobby where they just show up to open houses. They get a chuckle out of it. And then,
Look into
yeah.
ideas to remodel their house.
Yeah, yeah,
Right,
and
exactly.
a lot of times it's,
Let's look at how to
and
decorate.
yeah, and that's probably the most important thing, is to figure out if they're a serious buyer or if they're just looking, especially when it gets busy. So that's one of the first things that I ask, and then they'll come in, and then I'll ask them, if they've ever bought before, and really what I'm looking for is a topic to latch on to. So I can just start shoving a bunch of useful information down their throat as fast as I can.
Fire
Yeah, so like really not a whole lot to do with the house. So they'll walk in, like, what has you looking? They'll let me know, and I'm like, okay, this is a 2015 build, about 3,000 square feet, 5 bedrooms, just like the very basics. And then I'll ask them, oh, have you ever bought before? And if they say no, then I'll typically just start rattling off and lean into stuff in the contracts, like, oh, it's actually not that difficult. Like, I bought my house while I was in Germany and never even saw it until I moved in. Wouldn't recommend doing that, but it's not as bad as you think. And then I'll go through the basics, like earnest money. Most people don't know what that is. And just kind of real quickly go through, inspection, appraisal, things like that. And then like, hey, you just have to be careful though, because it's really hard to lose earnest money, but here's how it happens the most. And I'll talk to them about new loan terms and new loan availability. And most of the time, like, there are a lot of people that lose their earnest money because they never seen a loan estimate before they put in an offer, and the realtor and the client never pay attention to new loan availability. And that's a discussion that you have to have with the loan officer and the underwriter at that point. Is if you go past that, like, how bad is my file? Is it something easy I can get? Because you go past that and you don't get the clear to close, you lose the earnest money. Things like that. If they have bought before, similar things. But if they've bought before, they typically think that they know everything. So one of my favorite lends to use. Are there any lenders in here? Lender, yeah. So, and you can do the reverse with realtors. Yeah. So typically what I'll do is, don't yell at me, is I'll be like, hey, watch out for the lenders, because I'm sure you bought a while ago. They're real sneaky now with the points and everything, but you know how to shop, get a loan estimate and shop around, right? And they're like, yeah. And I'm like, yeah, you ask for a loan estimate on the same day from the lenders that you're interested in. And you feed them the purchase price, and the taxes and the insurance. And if they get mad at you, they're probably hiding something. And then what's going to happen is they're going to go up to corporate and get a pricing exception and all that stuff. And then you're just going to get a better rate. And then at that point, because nobody knows that really, even if they bought before, then they start paying attention a little bit more. And then I'll talk some more stuff about contracts. But with a loan officer, I would say, you got to watch out for the realtors. I see,
That's why
10,
I'm here.
right.
I'm going to do this for you guys.
Right. You would say, you probably do 10, 20 deals a month or something like that. Like, I see 10 times more deals a month, and there are just so many bad realtors out there, like 90% of them, like, they don't know how to negotiate. They miss stuff on the contract. They lose earnest money all the time. So I know most of all the realtors, and I know all the good ones, so I can help you out there. Yeah.
Yesterday, I had somebody I corrected the dates and terms for loan availability.
Right.
For somebody yesterday.
So you're killing them with information. So they're like, man, we should probably give this guy our information.
Yeah, because what they don't want is you walk into an open house and it's, oh, here's the house and here's the windows and here's the granite countertops and everything's happy and perfect, and they want to hear something educational, something a little bit negative that nobody else is telling them. And either those two things or things in the contract, also sometimes say careful who you work with, because there are a lot of bad realtors out there. Most of them are part-time, most of them do a deal or two a year, and so it's really hard to tell who has their head in the game, who doesn't, things like that. But there's
look at my arm.
yeah, right. There's so many different things, ways you can approach it. But something a little bit negative but educational, just to be like, hey, watch out, to communicate that you're watching out for them in a way.
You go over stuff in the house, like if you're doing someone else's open house, their listing. Are you walking around going, hey, be careful, windows like this, these are old act windows, and be careful of this? I mean, do you do that kind of stuff?
So I like the houses that have a little bit of things wrong with them. So after we have that conversation, I'm like, oh, I'm sorry, let me actually let you look at the house. And if there's, I'll do a walkthrough before, and, I like the ones with a little bit of settling cracks in them, just other things wrong with the house that aren't necessarily a big deal, but I'll point out things that are wrong with the house. Like, for example, if it's a complete dump and a flip, I'm gonna make fun of the house. I'm like, It needs a little bit of work, just like some, because like obviously they see that, and if you're in there like, oh yeah, this is an awesome house, it's the most amazing place ever.
Negative feedback from the listing agent at all over?
No, they don't know.
Huh?
They don't know.
Yeah,
I'm just saying, if he got
Yeah.
back to them in some fashion.
be careful if there
I
are
would
cameras
think
in
it
there.
could cause a problem.
Yeah, there's camera.
I mean, if like I've never said anything like, oh, this is the dumpy house, don't buy
Like
it.
You're totally
Right.
stigmatizing the place. but
Right,
You're,
yeah.
You're going
But-
that direction.
Right. like you've all seen houses before and it just like stains in the carpet everywhere, like just holes in the wall, things like that. Obviously, if they walk in and you're like, oh, look at this place, it's amazing, they're going to be like, okay, and they're not going to trust you. They're like, yeah, hey, it needs a little bit of work.
Pointing out the facts.
Yeah. And
The
then
blood over there.
yeah. So I'll usually tell them,
Crab tape still up.
yeah, I'll usually make fun of the house, and I'll tell them, hey, but this is actually a good thing for you, because everybody else is going to walk in. Everybody wants a house. Nobody wants to be a homeowner. So the houses that are really nice, typically there's going to be a bidding war. This is the type of house that you can save a lot of money on. I'll usually point to like this house. Where I listed it, put it on the market, and the carpet and paint were pretty bad, and we kept on getting lowball offers. So I took it off the market, and I repainted the interior for $300, and they spent $3,000 on some carpet, and it was a brand new house pretty much after that. I did some counter work too, but for all of maybe $4,000, turned it into this completely different house, and we almost ended up with bidding wars on it, and we sold it list price. So that's just kind of the workaround is you don't necessarily want to get into a bidding war. You want something that needs a little bit of work that you're comfortable with, because then you can oftentimes just get a better deal on it because nobody else is looking at it. Things like that. Like with settling cracks, I'll go through, love settling cracks because then I can go through and explain to them, these are the good ones, these are the bad ones. And hey,
Genius.
yeah, and hey, if you're worried about it, get a third-party structural engineer. Here's how much it costs. But I've seen enough houses, and the inspector's seen enough houses to let you know kind of what's normal and not normal. But if there's any doubt, get a structural engineer. Things like that.
They're like, hey, we don't want this house. We want you for whatever house.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah, so it's just just educating them pretty much like, hey, here are the bad things wrong with the house, but they're not that bad. Here's how you get around it, whatever it is in the house. Or if it's a really nice house, I'll just tell them, hey, it's a really nice house. Let's see.
Out of the people that you get come through an open house, what's your estimation of the number of people that are actually buyers, that have actually
I think
talked
about
to a lender or
yeah.
kind of know exactly? Because I did, I had this listing on Turquoise, and Park Vista Estates is a great open house neighborhood.
Yeah.
And I get people, and of course, there's always the people that says, "Oh, I live over on Diamond, but I got friends that want to live in my neighborhood."
Yeah.
Whatever, right? So,
Yeah.
and I'll get people going, "Oh, yeah, I don't know if I don't like the way the floor plan is and all this stuff," and
Yeah.
I don't really worry about it unless they're buyers. Because if you're not a buyer, I don't care what you think.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I found probably out of everybody, and there were a few people that had agents that obviously were buyers, and I had a lot of people, probably in the several that I did, over 40, 50 people,
Yeah.
couples, right, entities. I would say maybe 3 of them were buyers,
Yeah.
and none of them could buy
But,
that
Yeah.
house.
but what you're talking about is one open house.
Yeah.
No, I'm talking
He
about
did
Oh, yeah.
several.
30
Yeah.
or something,
Yeah, but
right?
I'm talking over
Yeah.
the course of like 4 or 5 open houses.
Pretty much.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Nobody was
Yeah.
a buyer.
Yeah, and that's kind of like what I'm looking for is people that are early enough in the process that they haven't spoken to anybody yet,
Right.
but late enough that they're actually like going to go look at a house. Because I've had them, I think the earliest was like 4 days. I met them in an open house, and then had them under contract 4 days later.
Right.
The longest was like a little over 2 years. But
Funnel.
yeah, yeah,
Absolutely.
and but yeah, so screening questions. So I like to ask them, okay, what do you want to keep your monthly mortgage payments at? Because that's something that just everybody knows, kind of off the bat. And then from there, I'll be able to bracket and say, okay, well, this house is probably outside of your price point a little bit. You don't want to be house poor. Here's where we should be looking, things like that. And I'll ask them, what loan type are you using? I love when they say, I'm using a VA loan. Then I'll tell them all about VA assumables because they never know about that. But then I'll just go over some basic karate math with what they want to keep their mortgage payments at, what price point they need to be in. I'll also ask them what they do for work, and that just kind of helps me like pre-qual them. Just so I know if I'm wasting my time or not, because sometimes people will walk in there and be like, yeah, I want to keep my monthly mortgage payments at like $1,000 a month, and it's like a $500,000 house. I'm like, oh, okay. Are you going to put anything down? No.
Put $475,000 down.
Yeah,
Your taxes and insurance.
Let me give you Jason Twitchell's number.
Exactly.
yeah.
Thanks, man.
He's a miracle worker.
Miracle worker.
If you're over 62, I can make that happen.
Yeah. And then after I've done all that, that's typically when I'll bring him back to the table and I'll show him, the market update, go over numbers real quick. And then after all that, I'll ask him, who are you working with? So it's really, really annoying, but you'll always get an honest answer. Either, hey, I'm working with somebody, or hey, if they say, after you ask them if they're working with someone and they say, oh yeah, I'm working with, Rob Reinmuth at Acquire Homes, they're actually working with somebody. If they say, oh, yeah, I've got a realtor, I'm like, oh, who is it? And if they hesitate at all, then I'll go in with, oh, have you signed paperwork with them yet? Because if they hesitate, then they're trying to think like they don't really know that person very well. And I'm like, okay, cool. Well, just go and interview a ton of agents. I'm one of them, by the way. And if you want to leave your email and phone number, we can stay in touch. But just go and take your time. You haven't signed anything yet. Keep interviewing other agents. There's 5,000 of us here in Colorado Springs. So what happened before that is I noticed that if I asked them a little bit too soon, like if it wasn't a good 5-10 minutes after I started talking to them, they would almost always give a fake phone number and email if they felt any pressure to actually sign up. And now I'll just get an honest answer from them after going through all that stuff, which is annoying because you'll spend a lot of time talking with somebody and you're hitting it off and they're like, yeah, I got a realtor, and you're like, shit. Yeah. And then if they do have a realtor, then I'll just get their name, the realtor's phone number, and then I'll shoot a text over to the listing agent at the end of it with all that info, and then notes like, do they like the property, not like the property, things like that, to help the listing agent out a little bit.
What hours do you typically hold them?
I like 12 to 3. 12 to 3 on both Saturday and Sunday. So like 6 hours a weekend. And then, I've kind of played around with all of them, and those are the ones that I think are the best. Also, I haven't tried this before, but I was doing an open house on another listing. I forget his name, but he's been around for a while. He's like, have you ever tried doing an open house, right after the school hours, like near schools, when mom and everybody's driving by, and churches and things like that. And so I haven't done that yet, but that's another thing you could do is during the week, just during school hours, try to do that around there. And then for the follow-up plan, about every month or so, it just depends on what their timeline is. But I'll go back and I'll follow up with them. So I'll tell you the Quail Lake open house, that was the best one ever. So had 4 deals from that one open house. Doing this open house in Quail Lake, and John and Sarah came in, got their info. We ended up closing 2 years later, this past summer. And then this other guy, Jeff, walks in, and he's got his home for sale up in Ravenglass in Broadmoor Bluffs. He's like, yeah, here's my house for sale. Let me know if you have anybody. And I hate my agent, so I'll probably use you when I buy. And I was like, cool. And open house ended. He left. And as I'm picking up the signs, this other guy, Mario, the pond guy, He walks up and show him around, and he's like, there is one house that I want to see, and he pulls up Jeff's house, like out of the odds of this,
Ravenglass?
right? That I met 5 minutes earlier. He pulls out Jeff's house, and he's like, I want to go look at this, and I was okay. So I take him up to look at Jeff's house, and he doesn't like it because he's picky and he still hasn't bought. But
Jeff is going, this
yeah,
guy
yeah,
is
and
Superman.
yeah, and so I kept in touch with Jeff and hadn't heard from him in a while, and I saw that his house finally closed. So I call him and he's like, "Oh yeah, I'll probably be looking here soon. We'll be in touch." And a week later, I sent out a market update, and 2 minutes after that, he sends me an email saying, "All right, I'm ready to go." And then so we went and bought a house, and then he referred me to Nick, the Incorvias, and then we did 2 deals. So that was 4 deals from one open house. And then also there were some other people that I showed about from that same open house. I showed them about 120 houses. They fell out of contract twice, and then I fired them. So it would have been 5. But yeah.
Okay, so do you
All-
think
yeah.
it's more of quality open houses or the number of open houses where, you could have bad ones and then you
Yeah.
can get lucky like that one? I mean,
It's just the number. I mean, like there have been ones where dozens, or I think
quantity is
yeah,
better than quality.
I like the listings that have just a medium amount of traffic, because if you have like 12 people showing up at once, it's really hard,
Can't do anything.
almost
I had one
impossible.
where it was
Yeah,
non-stop, and I didn't
Yeah.
talk to anybody.
Yeah, or
Yeah.
Because there was 2 or 3 parties
yeah,
yeah.
all day long. And
Yeah.
I couldn't watch the Ohio State-Michigan game that I just got on my computer.
yeah.
So it was a total
Yeah.
waste of time.
Yeah. So listings that like just hit the market that are too nice, not really a fan of, just because I want the traffic to be a little bit slower so I can have more conversations with people. So that just results in a higher conversion rate versus just a funnel of people, and I never really get a chance to connect with them.
Do you look at that in your search for houses of days on market? Do you want some that are
Yeah,
more
yeah.
been on the market for a while?
I'd pick location over that, because I mean, like there are some houses where I'm like, oh yeah, this is going to be a great location. Tons of people are going to show up, and like nobody shows up. But I've done it. There was one down in our neighborhood. It was the one, oh goodness, I don't think it ever sold, but it was the
Which street?
oh goodness, it's right across from the vet clinic. Right up the street. I forget the address of it, but they had just redone the exterior, and the interior was like super ugly and dated. But that one, I did like 4 open houses for them, and like 2 of those open houses, nobody showed up. And then one of them, for the entire weekend, one person showed up, and it was Mitchie and Vinny, and we closed a couple months ago. So,
Wow, it's
yeah.
quantity then.
So you don't necessarily think that there's any particular area of town where it seems to be always successful? It's just kind of...
North is better than like Fountain. So I've been kind of adjusting and trying to go up north, either north or my neighborhood in Cheyenne Meadows. Those seem to be like the best places. So like Ute Valley, anything west of there, not Peyton. I would never do another open house up in Peyton again. Super slow. I had when I was doing my listing up there, it was on the market for 3 months, and we only had 4 showings. And so I technically had to break from open houses for like 3 months, because every single weekend I was doing an open house, because that's the only way I could get people over there. And it was like one this weekend, nobody the next weekend, one the next weekend. That's actually where I met the Saps, by the way. So they walk in, and like they were the only people that showed up that whole entire weekend. And they really wanted something up in Woodland Park or in Black Forest, and so I had a whole search set up for them. And then they called me a couple days later and said, hey, just cancel that whole search. And I'm like, oh gosh, I lost them. And they're like, they sent me a house right down, we were in Paintbrush Hills, it was in Meridian Ranch. Cookie cutter house, not at all what they wanted. And they were like, we just want to put an offer in on this one. We saw it like right after we met you at the open house, but we want you to be our agent. And
Wow.
I never even had to see the house. So that was the fastest one. But yeah, it's just hit or miss. I mean, sometimes people are never going to show up. and it's just a dud. Sometimes one or two people show up and you pick them up. Sometimes a whole bunch of people. But I think just the consistency of doing it every weekend is the most important thing.
Right,
So,
because
And you're doing open houses 4 weekends a month?
yeah.
Yeah.
This past weekend, I didn't do one on Saturday because of the snow, but I did one on Sunday. Sometimes if it just snows too much, I'm just not going to do it.
right, yeah.
But especially because it's like I had one weekend I had to cancel it because the ground was so frozen I couldn't even get signs in. And I'm like, I'm
What
sorry.
if,
Like,
what if you have to
You
show
don't do-
homes
yeah.
during the
Oh.
weekend?
So most everybody I meet, like they know, like, hey, oh, you do open. Like, remember how I met you? I'm doing open houses every weekend. The other challenge is I don't want to lose clients because I'm doing an open house. So it depends on where they're at. If they're like, you know, a month or so out, I'm not going to cancel one open house for them.
Right.
But if they're like pre-approved and they're dropping offers and they're ready to go and something pops up, sometimes I just don't do it in an open house. So like there
Yeah,
were
right, exactly.
with Mitchie and Vinny, like we were in 6 or 7 bidding wars, I think. And we were go. So I think I missed like maybe 3 or 4 weekends for them. But they ended up closing. So that is a challenge that I was just trying to balance showings with open houses. But typically I'll be able to get them in, early Saturday or late Saturday for showings. But I try to protect that time as much as possible.
Yeah, so what you're telling us is we have to work our asses off to make $100 grand.
No, not really, because like most of the time, like other than Mitchie and Vinny and maybe 2 or 3 other people, for the most part, I'll get them to look during the week.
Yeah.
So that's usually what I'll do is try to have people schedule them for during the week after work. So that way during the week I'm showing houses a little bit more free, and then Saturdays and Sundays I'll usually just block off for openness. That's the other thing that I tell people is, because a lot of them like want a deal, and I'm like, hey, if you want a deal. We don't want to put an offer in on a Saturday or Sunday. We want to wait until Tuesday or Wednesday when they have no other offers and the sellers are a little bit more depressed.
Well, what's great about this is you're working smarter, not harder, in
Yeah.
a way, right? I mean,
Yeah.
he's got it down to his science. He's doing a lot of open houses that we all despise, but he's got it down to where he goes, I just said we have to work our asses off, and he goes, oh, no, not at all. Like,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, he's got his science down, and we're looking at it as like, oh, wow, quantity of open houses.
Yeah.
Hey, it's a job. You have 5 days a week to do whatever.
Yeah.
Your weekends, you got to make some money, right? So,
Yeah. I look at it as like the alternative is it's like really just 6 hours of prospecting with 8 hours if you include signs. So
Yeah, sure.
putting up the signs. Sometimes it takes 15 minutes. Sometimes it takes an hour or two. But also that's why I like looking for ones like this, because this only takes like 15-20 minutes to set up because it's not very far. Some of them I'll do it and I'll just put like our neighborhood, Cheyenne Meadows. I'll go, like you've probably seen the signs on like 115 all the way in front of King Supers and then all the way down at the Gate 3 intersection going up. That just like a little bit of a wider net. It takes about an hour.
Would you sign that in
But-
from Peterson too then, maybe?
Uh,
From Powers and then Peterson out that way to bring them in?
I've done one on on Powers a little bit up north. Some of the intersections are good. I'd have to look at a map,
Peterson has
but
quite a bit of traffic too, though, you know what I mean?
Yeah, yeah.
That's the only reason I'm asking.
yeah, I've never really
A difference between Saturday versus Sunday? Or is it just pretty hit and miss too, depending?
It's hit or miss. I mean, there's cycles. So, like for some months, nobody will show up on Saturday, and then everybody shows up on Sunday, and sometimes it reverse. I think it's just something in the air. But I do notice that where sometimes just nobody shows up on Saturday. Also,
Well, that's what I'd heard, is that Sundays are better, because typically,
Yeah.
like, especially anybody with kids, they
Yeah.
have a lot of sports things and
Yeah.
just, different things going on Saturdays. But
yeah,
it seems to
I didn't
me
know.
on a
That's why
Sunday, if
I
you,
wanted to ask.
every house, every neighborhood has a church somewhere.
yeah,
And I would literally go to the exit of the church parking lot. I'll stick a sign right there.
Yeah.
I'm telling you, there's got to be somebody that's going to come to my open house
Yeah.
Unless it's during the fall
because it's at noon when
and
they get out.
they got to get home to see the Broncos play.
Yeah, exactly. That's
Football's
the-
on.
Especially
That's
now
the
that
thing.
we actually
Yeah,
have
right.
a team. So.
right.
Yeah.
True.
So at what point do you, why don't you give out business cards at your open house?
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Oh, yeah. Going
You
back to
expense, I
that.
don't know.
Yeah. Maybe it's like I should probably give them a card, but I'll tell them up front. So okay, so I'll tell you this last one, right? So it was it last week? No, 2 weekends ago. I was just shutting down. It was the one where I met Ben at. Ben Townsend, yeah, well, he covered for me. So I was taking down all the signs, and a couple pulls up, and I was like, "Hey, sorry, I'm closing up. Do you guys have a realtor?" And they were like, "No, we're about a year out. We'll be moving here soon." I was like, "Okay, we'll come in and check out the house." They were like, "Are you sure?" I'm like, "Yeah." So I give them, walk them through the whole spiel. And at the end of it all, they're like, "Wow, thank you for being so transparent with us. Like you're super awesome. We've never heard any of that stuff before. Thank you, thank you, thank you." I'm like, "Cool, yeah, let's stay in touch, if you want to leave your phone number and email." And it's like 30 minutes past the open house ending. And they're like, "Do you have a card?" And I was like, "Nope." And I was like, "Listen, I'm not going to spam your email. I'm going to send you the market updates every couple weeks. I'll shoot you a text just to make sure you get it. And I get it. We're strangers, and you don't want your email blowing up and everything. But we'll just stay in touch that way. That way, we both have each other's contact info." And they were like, "Okay." And so they start putting down their email. And then the wife whispers, "Do the wedding email," which is they just gotten married. So that's kind of like their junk email. So I may or may not stay in touch with them, but I got their email. And if, yeah. And it's also, because I'm picky about who I work with, so it's also like a screening event, right? So I'll tell them, we'll have a great conversation, really hit it off, and then all they want is a card. And I'm like, "Listen, if I give you a card, like I do this every weekend, I'm never going to hear from you again. And to be honest with you, if you're not going to trust me with your email and phone number, you're not going to trust me when it comes to buying a house. And I just don't think we're a good fit." And I'll just let them go. Yeah. I should give them a card.
40, if you
Yeah.
had 40 open
Yeah.
houses,
Yeah.
and all these people had cards, I'd probably be saying, he did 10 last year in open houses.
Yeah.
Right? You probably have a few extra.
Maybe, but like, and you should give out cards, but
But you can do that digitally too.
One thing
yeah.
I've
Oh,
done
what I do is when I shoot them a text, I'll send them my business profile. And I'll be like, "I'm going to send you my business profile with reviews." That's way better than a card. But my thing is, like, if they're going to be stingy about the phone and email, I'm probably never going to convert them to begin with. Yeah, and I don't.
How about
yeah.
if you go to pens.com
Yeah.
and get the a pen with your name
Yeah.
and stuff? I mean, that would last a little bit longer. Or
Yeah.
something like that, right?
Yeah.
Do you have the feedback forms that you have them fill out for the house?
No.
No.
So it's either
You just
so.
give like the agent's verbal feedback.
Yeah, so I'll just shoot them a text. So like these are the forms that I was using before. And again, I would just ask them what they were looking for, write down their search criteria, take notes. I'd have them fill out the top, and then I would go back and send them a bunch of stuff, spend hours doing that, and then never hear from them again. Or sometimes, but what I noticed was the main hook was just the something of value, which is the market updates. So like on occasion, I'll send out a market update, and then somebody will reply and either say, "Take me off the list," or "Oh, I'm ready to look at houses." Most of the time, it's ready to look at houses because they see the market update, they actually read it, and it's local news things, statistics that nobody else is sending to them. Because what happens is they go to an open house, they meet a realtor, they give them their email, then they get put in an auto search, which is probably not a bad idea necessarily. But then they get all the auto search and everything, which is why they don't like giving out their email, and it's probably fake. But want to try experimenting with auto searches because it works for people, but like I just hate auto searches personally because I had a client get mad because they were like, "Why are you sending me this?" And I'm like, "Oh my goodness, stop!" Because it was just houses that didn't meet their criteria, met them on paper but not visually.
Always change their criteria.
Right. Yeah. And I'll tell them like, listen, chances are you're going to find the house on your own. Everything's online, everything's on Zillow nowadays. But you're not hiring me to find you the house. I'm not a tour guide. I'm not a door opener that has no value at all. You're paying me for advice and negotiating, and that's about it. So I'll explain that to them, and then sometimes they'll just start sending me houses randomly, or again, once I'll send out the market update, then they see it and they're like, "Oh, that's Charles. I'm ready to buy a house." And a lot of times it's the more educated, easier to work with buyers that like to read things, and then they just, I don't know, I guess they just like the data and everything on it. Versus, because I know a lot of people will send out, just the auto-generated market updates that I can't even read, to be honest with you. Like you got a PPR and they're like, "Here's a market update." And I'm like, what the hell is this? What does it mean? So I put the data and I just put it into words so it makes sense. And then news articles, either local to Colorado, most of the time just local to Colorado Springs. So, and that's just kind of like the hook that really works versus sending them a whole bunch of houses and a bunch of other stuff. So. And there's like tons of different things you can do. One idea, I don't really like it, but one idea was so you meet them, you send them the email with all the info, and then I usually just text them and say, "Hey, it was great meeting you guys. Sent you that email." And then if I don't hear from them, sometimes I'll follow up with them in like a week or two, just to be like, "Hey, did you get the market update? What'd you think?" Because it's a longer process for most of them. But also what you could do is do like one of those video text things, like say their names, I don't know, Nathan and Mary or something, and be like, "Hey, Nathan and Mary, it was great meeting you at the open house. I just sent you that email." And then, right, because I know like there's like Krista Mashore is all about like sending people video texts and things like that. I think it's a little bit cheesy, but that's something that could work. I haven't done it, but yeah. I haven't done that because it's just not me. Like that's kind of like weird. Yeah.
At what point do you go into agency?
Huh?
At what point do you go into agency with them?
Um,
I know they're
yeah.
trying to tell you to do it right up.
Right. Oh, so
But it's just like
yeah.
it's just not the right time. It's like you're being pushy.
right. So I'll also another knowledge talking point.
Yeah, exactly. It's
Yeah.
Just, what am I signing? It's like a used car salesman or something.
Yeah.
You know?
Another good talking point is the like the NAR lawsuit and everything, because when it comes to the knowledge part of trying to find something useful to talk about, you can talk to them about that also. But I'll let them know like, hey, NAR says we have to have something signed before we go look into houses. I really don't care, right? Because the Department of Justice said no, that's bad, and there's going to be another round of lawsuits. Most important thing is that Zillow, all those other people, they're doing disclosures up front. So what I'll do is I'll send them the relationship disclosure and the exclusive right to buy all filled out already, and that's the disclosure part. Like that's fine. That meets their criteria. Yeah. So so it's been disclosed. They see it.
Disclose that your managing broker forces you to do this.
Yeah. Well, but it's a good thing. Yeah.
Still do it
Well,
the old way.
Yeah.
That's what I mean.
Yeah. And I'm like,
To do a contract, that's when I do it.
yeah. And my thing is like, hey, here it is. You see it. I'm not going to force you to sign it. And me personally, what I do is I have a 1-day holdover period and 1-day termination period. That's the other thing that I'll talk to them about is like, hey, we're strangers at the end of the day. If you're working with me because a piece of paper says you have to, then I shouldn't be in business. So, you can sign the paperwork, not sign the paperwork, either way. Like, yeah, I could go show you a bunch of houses and then technically you could come back the next day with another realtor, put in an offer, and I'm screwed. please don't do that. But, it's about trust. Trust goes both ways, and this is my way of saying, my way of taking the first step and saying, I trust you. So that's what I do. But yeah, because if people are going to freak out if you're like, and it's, if you're like, hey, sign this piece of paperwork before you go see the house, because there's going to be another round of lawsuits on that, because that's what's going on now, is because people aren't understanding what they're signing, and they just want to go see the shiny house, but they have to sign the paperwork first, and that's going to be, I think that's going to be a whole new round of lawsuits.
I had a sign call, and I went to show it as my listing. And I said, here's the broker's disclosure. They did ask me, because on my sign, I put the co-op fee, 2.5% co-op available. They asked me what that was.
No, that's interesting.
And I said, well, that's for a buyer agent, with this NAR lawsuit. And I just explained to him a little bit. Yeah. So I get there, and I say, hey, I've got one thing that I'm required now with this new lawsuit, that it's a broker's disclosure. It just basically says that I'm working for the seller, and that if you purchase this house, here's how I'm going to get paid.
Yeah.
And they signed it. They looked at me, and they both signed it.
Yeah.
And to this day, I have no idea what their name is.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because they just went, shh.
Yeah, and even before the lawsuit, we still had to disclose if you were the listing agent, right? Yeah.
So it's, I did my job, and I don't know who these people are. It was
good.
Shelley and Nathan, but I don't think that anyone knows what they're doing. That NAR thing, but.
Yeah.
And what it did was it put them at a level of distrust.
I just talked to a buyer this morning that said, I signed the contract, but I didn't look at anything. I don't know what all 20 some pages say. And I was like, oh, that's awesome. Great agent. Yeah.
Shows how much trust they have.
No, I'm just a lender, man.
Yeah.
On that one.
We're not practicing law at all.
Yeah, exactly.
No.
Awesome.
Yeah. But I guess the big takeaways are like do it every weekend, put out a bunch of, because the signs are what's going to bring in most of the unrepresented people, and then make sure that the listing agent puts it in the MLS. But signs are the most important thing. Doing it every weekend, and then just
information.
Yeah. So
Thank you so
Good
much.
stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah, right on.
Thanks, man.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll see you later. Yeah.
Any last question for him?
Give me a call. I just gotta.
Yeah,
Kinda have to
I'll
be
call you a
next-
little bit.
But I can do that next.
Extrovert, like for this.
Yeah. Don't drink the night before, because like you have to be like really like
On your game.
Yeah,
Like,
Take up the whole
you have to
house.
approach
Yeah,
people with that uncomfortable.
yeah. Because if I'm like either tired or hungover, then I'm like, hey, here's the house. So I've got to be drink a couple Red Bulls beforehand. Huh?
Let me know if you have any questions on the way out.
Yeah.
Just sit there.
But
Upstairs.
yeah, I usually chug a bunch of coffee or a Red Bull or something beforehand, so I'm just like ready to just go into talking mode.
Oh, you didn't explain the no snacks.
Oh yeah, no, it's just so there are 6 serial lookers, and I know them. I see them almost everywhere. There are really serial lookers, and so my thing, So mainly because like you're either gonna like buy some fancy stuff. Like for my own listings, I'd probably do snacks. Because then I'm actually like really trying to sell the house. If they have a realtor, then I'll go into more of like a sales pitch mode for the house to try to get them to put in an offer.
Right.
But if they don't, it's more educational. But like it just seems tacky to me and doesn't make any sense to spend money on snacks for people that may or may not ever turn into a client,
Right.
and it makes a mess. And that's not what people are there for. So I want their focus to be on the information that I'm telling them, versus anything else. So like I keep them like away from the house, but more on all the information that I'm trying to shove down their throat. So they just feel educated a little bit more, things that nobody else is telling them or telling them in a certain way. versus, you know, because every other house that they go to, they're going to get the same thing, like, oh, look at this wonderful house,
Here, have
you
a
know,
cookie.
and here can you sign
Right.
in?
Yeah.
Cookie, you have any questions?
Yeah,
Yeah, no, let me
yeah.
fire hose information
Yeah.
down you.
So-
Staying right there.
Right?
Yeah, so like pretend you're a school teacher and it's a student walking in and you have like 5 minutes before you lose their attention, that kind of thing.
Right.
Yeah.
So,
I had a broker open house once, and I had it catered, you know, tapas type of stuff, red wine, white wine. Well, red wine and beige carpet.
Oh, man.
How'd it go? It was great, man. I got a lot of good feedback and everything.
Put a carpet
What about the
in.
spot in the living room? I go, what? So I
Wow.
hired a carpet guy from our BNI group, and he got the red stain out. Now it became yellow.
Wow, that sucks.
I'm so glad I had him under agency on the buy side too, because it was tough.
Oh, that's a tough.
We should
So-
talk about E&O insurance
I don't do that
sometime.
no more.
Exactly.
Yeah.
In round table, we can talk about it
Yeah.
tomorrow. Okay,
Cool.
cool.
thank you.